Welcome, everyone, to today's podcast. My name is Vanessa Simpkins, founder of Take Your Power Back Now. And today we are joined by the amazing Cat Caldwell Myers. We're talking about addiction, sobriety, sober living, a sober January, kicking off the year, New Year's resolutions, all of this in one whole conversation today. And it's a really important topic. Cat is the founder of an amazing book called The Adventure Paradox, a podcast, The Adventure Paradox. We met years ago as colleagues, as soul sisters in one of my programs. And so grateful to have you here today, Cat. You have a lot longer in sobriety than I do. I think 2023 for me was the year to get sober. And so maybe kick us off with how you started your journey.
Oh, sure. First of all, it's so great to be here. And what's up, everybody? I'm so happy to be here with you, Vanessa. I love you so much. And I think my first thought that comes, you said you have a lot more time. It's just one day at a time. It really is just one day at a time. I know that's so cliche in the recovery world, but the truth is, the more time you have from your last drink, the closer you are to your next drink, right? So I feel like it's a daily practice of doing the things to stay in a good place. And most of us, we drink to stop feeling certain things, right? We don't know how to deal with life, or it's a lot of fun. My experience of drinking was that it was a lot of fun, then it was fun and problems, and then it was a lot of problems. I had problems going on internally, I had problems going on externally. Let's remember, I was in my 20s. Does everybody remember being in your 20s? If you're listening, you're only 22 once. I'm thinking of like the Taylor Swift song right now, right? But the truth is, I was at the end of my 20s and my drinking and other things was really out of control. And somebody called me on it. I was actually in a life coaching program. I don't know if you know this part of my story. I was in a life coaching program with the incredible Debbie Ford.
I
And
met her before she passed.
love her. So she certified me as a shadow coach, doing a program specifically called Blueprint, which is finding your purpose, why you came here. So I was in her certification program, and I wrote every week you would like make a goal, and then you would sort of assess how you did on that goal and why you didn't think you reached a goal. Well, I was really addicted to a lot of different things. And you're learning all kinds of stuff about really being honest and having integrity, all these great life coaching values. And so I felt like I was being honest about the fact that this addiction was distracting me from completing my art car, which is what I was working on at the time. And I wrote this in writing to the right-hand man of the life coaching program, because I had sort of my like one-on-one accountability person. Next thing I know, that guy's calling me, and I'd never gotten a call from him. And he said, Kat, how can we certify you to be a life coach when you're telling us in writing that you're engaged in, at the time, illegal drugs, right? Things have changed since that time, but regardless. And Debbie Ford's story and her addiction to cocaine. And how could we certify you, if you still got this kind of a thing? I said, well, I don't understand the problem. I'm being honest. And I think, we sort of have people coming in from two sides of it as we're starting to get better. You can't see it till you can see it. And I just could not see that alcohol was a problem. I could see that marijuana was a problem. I'd made a New Year's resolution not to smoke pot. I got drunk and I was back to smoking, right?
Well, I think that's it's so socially acceptable. Let's talk about alcoholism, but so many people switch out alcohol for magic mushrooms. They sign me up for that one. I microdose mushrooms for a whole summer. Don't touch them anymore. And it was illuminating. I do not need any kind of anything infiltrating my channel of intuition. But you can just take one addiction and swap it out for another. Alcohol seems to be very, very socially acceptable, right? And what I love to dive into maybe a little bit here soon is the shadow parts, right?
Mm.
We have these shadow parts of ourselves, and how do those express? Um, but you've been sober now for how many years? Long
It'll be
time.
15 years in April.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. And I will say, I think different people, we identify with different seasons. So I think of myself as a spring fall person. I love changing seasons. I love change. Tony Robbins talks about people who love certainty or uncertainty. I actually thrive on uncertainty. Certainty,
I'm
too much routine, 9 to 5, not my thing.
I kind of meet you there. I kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
meet in that wildness.
That's what
Mhm.
I was gonna say. So many addicts and alcoholics, we meet in that wildness. And what's so beautiful about it is when we start to understand that it's the feeling behind the feeling. That's the levels deep, right? Debbie Ford talked about it's not the thing itself, it's the meaning we ascribe to the thing, right? And right now there's this whole thing. This is actually interesting. I want to riff on this a little bit. There's this whole thing in the coaching world right now about do what makes you feel good. Do what makes you feel good. Get into the state. Get into the state. Get into the state where you feel good. And I feel like if you're speaking to an addict, whether it's chocolate cake, more meth, I live in a place where meth is a really serious issue in this area. You're looking at things that don't make you better, even though you think they make you feel better. It takes a long time to understand that that is actually a quick fix to simply not feel what you're feeling. Because you
Yep.
don't know how to feel what you're feeling. And when George and I were first dating, and we were both broken in so many of the same places, when you find your soulmate, you just, the puzzle pieces fit, right? I remember him saying to me, baby, feel the feelings. Like, don't want to feel these feelings. Like, I can identify them and identify that I don't like this. But how do we take the action to turn down the dial and start to live and face our feelings, like the interview that you and I did, right? Those fascinating fears.
This was my journey of starting to heal trauma after my divorce, and I changed my email signature to like love yourself, you're worth it. And then I was like, well, how the heck do I do that? Like, it sounds so simple, and everyone has this cliche of, oh, just love yourself. But when you kind of grew up and learnt self-abandonment as a way to belong in a family structure, um, how do you integrate, and to your point, how do you even start to feel your feelings?
Mm.
um and there are so many, I like to look at addiction as like, well, these are ways to numb out, avoid. These are ways to, it's a coping mechanism, right? To look at, not with judgment, with kindness, care, grace, and compassion on those parts of yourself that did that to survive a highly dysfunctional family unit system, neglect, abuse, persecution, denial. It's really, really deep. And the other day we were talking about becoming sober, and you're kind of adding on to this kind of a layer of like feeling our feelings. How do we even identify? How do we give ourselves permission to? Um, but we were talking about being sober is like building a house, or like having a solid foundation. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Oh, yeah, sure. I was on a walk at the time, if you remember, and I was walking around beautiful Teton Valley, Idaho, mountains, snow, grass. And I was saying that when you first get sober, it's a little bit like the experience of being, that's the foundation, that's the first step, because now you can actually feel, you're showing up present. But it's like having a slab of a house put down. That is not comfortable. There's no shelter from the elements because life is going to continue. You just have that foundation. And at the time we were talking, if you remember, I sent you that picture. Literally right in that moment, I looked over and I saw a crushed foundation, right? All ripped up with all this rubble, right? And the truth is, when you get sober, many of us, if alcohol was your thing, now that you've taken that thing away, you recognize it's just a symptom, but you have that sensation of having no foundation, not even knowing how to go out to a party, not having any idea how to make dinner without drinking wine, not having any idea how to do anything, right? And I remember in early sobriety feeling like, because I was in my late 20s, and I was living in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and let me tell you, I did not move to Jackson Hole, Wyoming to get sober, right? I was here for the party. I was present for the party. I was showing up for it. I was a total social butterfly. I had, lots of different things going on. And I remember thinking, am I never going to have any fun anymore? And the beautiful part of that is if you go back to that childlike innocence, guess what? Rafting was fun before rafting and drinking was fun. Riding horses was fun before riding a horse with a beer was fun. Skiing was fun before skiing with après and maybe all day long if the snow sucks was fun. You get to go back to like, actually, what's fun in the cleanest sense of the term? Like, what's truly fun without me trying to always turn the volume up? Because I'm the kind of person where when I turn the volume up, I take a drink and then the drink takes a drink. I'm like, how did I get these cuts on me? Like, who is this person? Like, what was that? And they're like, oh, yeah, you don't remember you climbed the hot dog stand in front of everybody last night? I mean, I had a lot of blackouts. And I think that's an important thing to talk about because when you talk about the foundation, certain folks who are really struggling deep in their disease of alcoholism and addiction, they don't know what happened. They don't even know what happened. And they'll make jokes about it. Like, oh yeah, I time traveled. I joked about being an alcoholic for a long time before I could talk about it confidently and own it and understand that as a result, these are the things I do to take care of myself.
And this is what, Brene Brown talks about toxic shame and how it lives in secrecy, right? So when we talk about it, when we share our truth with love, the shame can't build, right? That shame and the pressure let me have a drink, let me shop online, let me porn, smoke, eat, stuff your face with sugar. There's so many ways addiction can show up, including being addicted to feelings like resentment or a victim or anger. Or I was having that conversation the other day with a friend of mine, or addiction to fantasy, ways that we survived. And I love this whole conversation around a solid foundation and a house. I moved to Mount Shasta 5 years ago. I bought this house, completely gutted it from the inside out. I was like, oh, it's going to be like a fun ski house and a, summer house. Had no idea I would move here during the pandemic. Such a reflection of my own inner gutting, cleaning, getting sober. I feel like I've been cleaning for 5 years, cleaning out everything, literally cleaning, like it's been nonstop, cleaning the business, cleaning my body, cleaning my relationships, my responses, my relationship with myself, looking at, addiction in my family, unsubscribing from, nope, we're not going to do that anymore. People pleasing, bye, Felicia. Okay, how else do I abandon myself? Delete. And this idea of, well, who the heck am I if I'm not drinking wine every night? Who the heck am I if I'm not abandoning my needs for rest and creativity because I'm addicted to overworking and performing so that, people can need me and I can feel validated? Okay, who are you without all of that? So really taking a good hard look at and a whole new foundation. And I live in a whole new house, I behave a whole new way. And looking at, well, who are the people, like, what are the reflections outside of myself? There's a lot of people in my life that are addicts. I mean, you stop drinking, but hey, you're still an addict. You can replace that with working out, still an addiction. You can replace alcohol with mushrooms, still an addiction. Ooh, hey, we go really deep here. And then there's the part where like you get into, well, now my life is boring. No, it's not boring. It's just peaceful. Okay. There's not that maybe, I don't know if it's like a dopamine hit,
Tell you a little secret. So drama, we're addicted to drama. We're totally, and somehow we're wired for it because we humans were wired for the negative. We're wired for the gossip. We're wired for the da 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 da. And it's a retraining of the mind to recognize that that actually, is that serving us? How is that serving us? How is that helping? And stories, we love the stories, right? We're totally into the stories, but I'll tell you what happened after that call with the right hand man of the life coaching program. I said, well, I want to get certified. What can I do to stay on? And he said, well, you need to stop drinking. You need to go totally sober for 3 months. And he challenged me. And I was like, okay, done. I'll do this. Let me tell you something, Vanessa. I had no drama.
Yeah.
I wasn't accidentally sleeping with my friends' boyfriends. Oops. Right? I wasn't going home with men I didn't mean to go home with. This is something I think a lot of women are uncomfortable talking about is what does it do with those desires, your sexual desires? You know, the jokes, the beer goggles, all of that, right? But like she's easy, 2 drinks, da 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 da. And what happened to me at the end of my drinking is I was truly pickled. I might have been able to drink a lot of drinks earlier on as a cucumber, but by the time I was in my late 20s, you would put one drink in me and I just off the races, it wouldn't take much. And so trying to control different aspects, no marijuana, no hard liquor, only wine on weekends, these are some of the very common symptoms of someone who is struggling with their relationship with alcohol. And again, once we take the alcohol away, we start to see the other things that are actually gifts. So you were talking about unsubscribing, but thinking about what we actually subscribe to. Like, am I subscribing to dramas? Or am I saying, okay, if I'm going to unsubscribe to that, I better find something else that fills me up. Like shows like Heartland versus Yellowstone. And we might still have a guilty pleasure for Yellowstone, but understanding what it is and what it isn't. Because some of it is that manifestation work we were talking about. Gabby Bernstein saying, when you find that negative thought, that thing you don't like. First time I watched Yellowstone, I couldn't deal with it. It's a trauma. It's a horse wreck, right? Like I was not in a space. We were hauling horses. I was like, I don't want to watch this. Well, later, everyone talking about it, I came back around. I totally love Yellowstone. Give me that Beth Dutton. You know what I mean? But it's like
Wild.
finding, you totally are Beth Dutton, by the way, but
Oh
finding
no.
like on some level with the fur today, come on. But
Oh
on
yeah.
some level, it's like learning what we do subscribe to in our power, in our authentic self, because truly when we reach that next level of healing, becoming sober is a part of that.
I I feel like this authenticity piece and this like knowing thyself and experiencing real like inner freedom, that has truly been a gift, a wow, a true gift. And I think I shared that with you because I came to the Teton Valley. You were like, hey, come riding. I was like, oh. And I remember leaving for this trip and being in my garage or, the carport and just like, okay, I'm leaving for 30 days. Do I have the roadmap? Is my car? And just taking like 15 minutes to just be like, sitting there, I've got my tea. Okay, the music playlist. I'm gonna have a snack. I'm gonna go get some gas, some eyelashes. Okay, this is what I'm doing. Versus rewind 4 years ago, leaving the driveway in a like not going back and forth to the house 4 times, not being able to even leave the house for an hour because the phone, just the sheer chaos and madness and drama. And to sit there for a minute and be like, wow, now that's success.
Mhm.
Check that box. Peace, inner freedom, not being ripped around by your coping mechanisms, by a trauma response. I didn't make a real decision to get sober. Maybe I did. I mean, I kind of just started losing. I kind of just started losing flavor for it. And then when I was on this trip this summer, I went out. My friends were like, "You should go out. You're single. Go out to a bar." I was like, "I don't know. I don't really want to go to a bar." And I should have been like, "Listen to that, okay?" I
Mhm.
should have been like, "Hey, listen to that. You don't need to go to a bar. Like, I can just go to bed right now. Who cares if it's 10 o'clock and I'm in a town where there's a lot of people? Like, I'm just going to go to sleep." Should have listened to that. Didn't. Went out to a bar, had a drink or two. Next day, went on a hike with this guy, saw a fucking rattlesnake, cracked my fucking head open, 3 staples in my head. And I was like, I got it. That's it. That's enough.
Yeah.
Enough. Done.
Burning bush.
When a snake comes up, hey man, wow, it's so fascinating. So that I think for me was really the big sign. The God was like, "That's enough now." I'm like, "That's enough. That really is enough." Um, so yeah, these gifts of being authentic. And what would you say? I mean, we're here in this new year. Everyone's like, "Oh, New Year's resolution. I'm going to quit drinking. I'm going to get, thin. I'm going to lose all this weight." Everyone kind of gung ho's into the new year with all these resolutions. What would you say were like the hardest stumbling blocks for you in the beginning of your sobriety journey?
Well, first, what's coming through is those first couple of months sober are so sacred because I feel like you can hear and are tuned into things that you were not able to hear before. So, my experience was I would wake up and let's talk about New Year's. How about that hangover? Is it lasting all month? How much did you do? And I had enough experiences of legit 30 or 60-day hangovers from things other than alcohol, things that truly do stay in your system a lot longer, that I understood that there was a halo effect. And I did those 3 months sober, then I had a relapse, and from that experience, I also recognized just how messed up I was when I put something in my system. So I
Yeah.
talk about it like a wake-up call. And so I had a couple things come through really loud and clear in those first few months of sobriety. I would wake up in the morning and I would have literal downloads, like I could hear a voice in my head, Vanessa. And two that came through really loud. One was, "You're awake when you say you are. You're awake when you say you are." Everybody's all about awakening right now, right? Like, wake up, wake up. Don't you love staying at the hotel where you get the concierge? "Good morning, Mrs. Myers. It's 6 a.m. This is your wake up call." But that doesn't feel good when you're hungover, does it? Even if you requested it, right? Like, we're not starting right because we didn't go down right. And when we start going to sleep sober and we wake up sober, we start stringing together this consciousness because we're available, not through the drink, not through the drink. Again, this is speaking as an alcoholic in recovery, right? But you're awake when you say you are. That was one of them. And the other one, this is going to come through a little bit funny. Imagine I'm grabbing your shoulders and shaking you. "I will be gentle with myself." And I recognized for the first time just how hard I am on myself so often. How hard I was on myself for the things I was doing for drinking. I did not want to be an alcoholic, right? I did not want to be honest about not being able to control my drinking. But then there's another side. There's always another way, right?
Well, let's talk about control for a minute because, oh boy, woohoo! Do I love control? Let me tell you what. And I see that, the whole shaking of like, can I be gentle with myself? That was a big part in my healing journey of like really having kindness, care, grace, compassion for all the traumatized parts of me that showed up as a in behavior of that as this. And so just a continual compassion for that part, loving that part instead of punishing and even looking at the roles that I played in my family to clean, to belong, to look good. Oh, my dad was an alcoholic, famous artist. I actually put one of his paintings up here in the living room. He was a brilliant artist, total alcoholic, completely just, mother came in and like rescued and, so I looked at all of this and control, for such an out of control experience and ways that I control now, that's cleaning for me. Okay. Cleaning is a control thing for me. And I noticed it just even yesterday. I was like, Oh my gosh, this is a whole scary thing. I'm inside the back of my YouTube account. I haven't been in here in 2 years. It's a mess. I need to clean it. Okay, this is really scary. Oh my God. Wow, you invested $867,000 in YouTube ads. Oh my God, that's more than my house. Okay, it's okay. You got this. Oh my God, right? Like, and I got off the call and I was like, I pick up the vacuum cleaner, I start vacuuming. I'm like, what are you doing right now? I'm like, what the heck are you doing? And I'm like, wow, you feel so out of control and this is so scary. So you're cleaning. I'm like, oh, oh.
There's a recovery saying, and it's a triangle. And so one side of the triangle is clean house.
Mm,
The next side of the triangle is trust God.
mm,
And the last piece of the triangle is help others. And they
mm,
keep working because here's the thing, can we help others if our own house is not in order? Right? If our own house is not in order, can we trust God? Often we're not trusting God because our house is out of order because the house just burned down, you know? And we can go into anything, right? Like we can get into cleaning, over cleaning, like I'm thinking of Hamlet, out damn spot, right? If you remember the queen, right? And sometimes you're awake when you say you are, your house is clean enough.
yeah. There's
Like,
there's also this idea of relationships, right? Like how can you be in right relationship with others if you're in codependency or narcissistic cycles or giving your power away to that person to love you instead of trusting God or learning ways to love yourself, to source yourself. That's been a lot of the journey. Yeah, good hard look at here. It's really not a journey for the faint-hearted.
no,
Oh my
it's not. Yeah. I think life in general, I did a lot of podcast interviews this year with people over the age of 70, 80, 90, and their perspective on what we're all doing and what really matters and the highlights of their lives, right? And that's the truth is sobriety. Again, if you get to this space where you just recognize it's not working. And sometimes other folks are the ones saying to you, like, hey, it's not working, right? Sometimes it's the red, white, and blue angel, like there are lots of different ways it can show up. But it's changing the entire trajectory of your life. I love that 2-degree thing. I don't know if you've heard this, but if you're a ship and you leave from port and you just change your trajectory by 2 degrees, you're going to end up in a totally different place. And again, if you keep drinking and drugging and you keep going in this direction into 2024 versus saying, oh, like Harry and David sent me a thing right now,
God.
sober mocktails. It's like a kit that they offer. This is very common. But what if instead of for a month, and this is how it happens for a lot of people, they try out a month and they're like, actually, I feel a lot better. Like there are still things happening. I remember a friend of mine who was walking through her first experiences of a month sober. And she's a doctor, and she had a really horrible domestic violence case with a child come in. And she went home and she realized in the past, I would have opened up a bottle of wine to drink through this because this is horrible that this happens in this world. And
Mhm.
suddenly she was like, what else could I do? I'm going to light a candle. I'm going to say a prayer. I'm going to trust God on this, right?
Yeah.
This is his world, right? And an altar, I mean, that's a kind of house cleaning. Connecting with God is a high kind of house cleaning. Calling and telling another person, hey, I made it through a really, really horrible experience sober is a way of helping another. Because then they realize, like, oh, wow, you could walk through something like that. Maybe I could too.
Yeah, we show up as these reflections of light. And I think I really struggled a lot with like how I interacted as the savior in my family. I'm gonna rescue my mom, let me raise my sister. And when I started healing trauma, I was like, mm-mm, no, unsubscribe. I'm gonna let you have your relationship with God. I'm not God for you. And whoa, and you take your power. I call it like taking your power back now. And it is having that relationship with what you might call God or source, um, not looking for the external validation. I mean, I don't see people healing addiction without doing some really deep trauma work,
Oh,
shadow
yeah.
work. I
Yeah.
don't see it happening. I mean, I certainly, that was, the divorce was really my wake up call to be like, okay, all right, okay. Let's just, it was either like stay in that marriage, stay at that warp speed, die of a heart attack, neck blowing out every year for 4 years in a row. Same time I got married, it was like my body was like, "Hey, man,
Yeah,
heal and deal time." I don't see people healing without that really deep work. Will you share a little bit? We were talking yesterday about you mentioned the paradox of the family and the empath.
for sure. I'm trying to think what context we were in with that, but it's so easy to take on other people's stuff, right? Talk about cleaning house, right? And get to the place of realizing, wait, this might not be mine. This might be something that I took on that my mom always said. So, for example, I've been thinking about this one a lot lately. Mama always said there'd be days. What is that really? Right? Like, if we go 7 levels deep on that, what is that? Right? And it's coming clear. I don't want to talk about this too much publicly in an open space, but my mom is working through some mental illness diagnoses and really looking at her thoughts and some of the thoughts that I took on as true and asking myself, what's that mean exactly? I think we were driving today, so we can talk about the family, but we can also talk about the cultural family, right? And I was thinking, we have this culture that's 40% of people are struggling with mental illness post-pandemic. Basically 50-50 kind of wherever you go, right?
This whole spiritual war, this whole, I mean, we have not been conditioned to see these images, to go through this separation. It's been an initiation. I'll tell you what.
Yes.
Pandemic was an initiation to a mass collective spiritual awakening, mass collective midlife crisis, which is what? Having a spiritual awakening, cultivating parts of your soul that have been, pushed out.
I feel like we're so uncomfortable with mental illness, and it's tricky because you can't see it. You can feel it. It's invisible, right? It's one of the invisible diseases. And so it can be very hard to diagnose and understand what's going on with someone, but you have these clues that things aren't right. Very similar to alcoholism and addiction. Sometimes you can see someone drinking, but you don't know that they were in their car with a little preload, right? You have no idea. You have no idea what happens after they leave your house, what's going on with their internal thoughts, right?
Yeah, I think we were talking about this, the family and the empath. I think what we were talking about was like, oh, here's the other side of being an empath, is that you feel and you take on, and then maybe that's how we were getting into this conversation about, is this mine or is this not mine? Is this my stuff? When I was at your house I'd started really doing some really deep compassion work,
Mm.
and my mother checked herself into a psychiatric ward, and she, unknowingly, I mean, she walked in, she's like, oh, they're going to give me a psychological evaluation, lock her down for 30 days, pump her with lithium. I mean, it was like, wow, it was radical what came up, within my sister and I, like, just wow. And so interesting, in this awakened age, I don't really see people. We're always just seeing ourselves out there. I have another client who sent me a text saying, my mother's in the hospital. She's, I'm like, yep, I get it. I bet you that's bringing up a lot within your, you and your sister. And it's real, mental illness is a real thing. I kind of see it really close. It's in there with addiction for me. My mother drank. She still drinks. She's 70 something years old, 77 years old, I think.
Mhm, mhm.
And she has conversations with me like, oh, when I come over to your house, I hope that I can have some wine. And I'm thinking to myself, like, huh, like, I don't care if other people drink, that's okay. But then I thought to myself, well, what would happen if you come over and drink? Like, that'd be really interesting to see. Is that just like me giving you a ticket to be nasty? Do I even want to put myself in that situation? So it's really looking at, like, what is not like, what is loving, let me put your needs in front of my own, or what is really loving for me.
Mhm.
you
I
know,
think,
finding like new ways to nourish yourself, new ways to support, to belong to yourself.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's
and creating a new role for yourself in the family. It's kind of like this. I always talked about this tug of war with like a, you know, a piece of rope, and you let go, and it's like, wow,
I
and
think
when
I
you fight
know
anymore.
yeah, I think I know what we were talking about because this came up with someone I was working with recently, where she recognized she wants everybody to be happy. She just wants everybody to be happy. And you finally get to the place of realizing that you can't do it for anybody else. You can't make your mom happy, you can't make her better, you can't, and starting to recognize that the only person, talk about that reflection, you can do it for. And so this is Debbie Ford talks about this all the time, or did. How am I that? How am I that? This is the shadow work, right? And I feel like mental health, similar to addiction, once you start to recognize, because I was driving and I was just sort of feeling like not down exactly, but just sort of like, this is just kind of like a, like, day, right? Moment. It's not one of the highs. It's not, I'm not super low, but I just sort of, how often, especially when I was using, did I not want that feeling? Anything not to feel meh. It's not even like neutral is no longer okay. And if you're down, well, that's really bad. Do something to get you up, And something I've
Mm.
discovered, and I like to think about it as mental hygiene, right? Taking care of cleaning house in my own thoughts and recognizing I can fill my head with good stuff or bad stuff. It's up to me, right? It's up to me. I have a choice. And I think so often we feel like, especially in mental illness, do they have a choice? And I will say, I think it's important, speaking of the root cause, there are some people who will never get over their addictions. Alcoholism, drugs will literally kill them. It will
Well,
take them to
it
the
killed my
other side.
father. My father died at 66 years old outside of his friend's apartment on the grass with a smile on his face, but he was out, you know, smoking weed, drinking, and his birthday the night before. You know, we could sugarcoat and say, "Oh, he died with a smile on his face." The motherfucker died with no teeth, not a cent to his name. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like, like I can really talk to you about growing up around addiction.
Oh, yeah.
Uh, I'm not gonna, and I didn't actually have my dad's painting in my house over here. I keep it in the basement. It's the
Mm,
only one in my actual house. But I was like, let me see what it looks like up here. I'm like, let me just bring this out here. And it's a really interesting painting of like being on top of the mountain and this blossom. It's just this one blossom. And I'm like, that's interesting, flower blossoming.
mhm.
Um, and I just thought I'm going to bring it up here. I'm going to leave it here for this conversation. But yeah, who we become in the family, how we belong, how we, um, and he died of addiction. There, you're right. There are a lot of people who won't make that choice, who can't, or who there won't. In my sobriety, when my start, the very very beginning of this, looking at it, not even recognizing addiction was part of it. Okay, it was like, okay,
Mhm,
this
mhm.
is trauma. Okay, let me. This is a whole new world of trauma. I didn't know anything about trauma. Okay, what? Huh. Okay, addiction wasn't even in my brain. Um, but like, I lost my train of thought.
I have a
Looking,
thought.
at, looking. We were talking about what?
I
How
want
do I get on
to,
this?
yeah, insert a thought, and it might take you back to it. But losing your dad from alcoholism, trauma, that's where you were. I've also lost many loved ones, including an uncle and mental illness. And I think going back to that triangle idea of cleaning house, this being the only thing we can control, trusting God, we can do work on that, right? But sometimes it's a really, God, what is this? Like, this is a hard one for me to understand why things are happening this way. And then that last piece of helping others, there are people that are beyond our help that we literally cannot help, we cannot save. Often they are
This is
loved ones.
this is what. Thank you. This is what it was. It was this piece about making a standard, and the standard was either you can and you will, or you can't and you won't, and that's fine. But if you can't and you won't, whatever it is, meet my needs, meet me emotionally, then you have to leave. And so that was kind of a really harsh cutting off and a judgment part, and actually like a splitting apart, a compartmentalization part. And then I started looking at, well, what ways do you cut yourself off, Vanessa, when you can't meet your own needs, when you won't, wow, how harsh have you been? Like, woo, how judgmental have you been? Um, and I, this is like a radically honest conversation about this topic. Like, some people won't address their emotional issues or their addiction to emotions, or they can't, they don't have the tools, or they won't, and they die as addicts. And it's like, for me, it's been this journey of like, whoa, okay, can I radically love and accept all parts of myself and other people with wherever they choose to, can't or won't, can or will,
Mhm.
and can I love myself enough to like recognize the difference, set a healthy boundary. Um, it's and mental illness. Yeah, let's take a peek into how much mental illness really is wrapped around addiction.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, in Debbie Ford's life coaching certification, when we would assess whether or not to take on a client, if they were on any sort of prescription medication for mental illness, we're not allowed to work with them. Now that takes a lot of people out, you know? But let's really look at that. Like, what's going on? And then later, I think, and I'm no longer, my certification's not active, but they made a caveat to that saying, unless you're working with your psychiatrist actively and they know that you're working on this shadow work with us, because you can really activate somebody, taking them into trauma, taking them into reliving something. I'm a huge fan of Waking the Tiger, Peter Levine. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but it's the idea of like, we don't, and the body keeps score. He did an interview with that author. I can't remember his name right now, but we hold it, right? We hold it, and then we try to douse it with all kinds of different things. And I mean, you can refill that God-sized hole with over exercising, da 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 da, and all of those things are taking us away from the simple trust that this is just how the world is, right? We don't get to decide who gets better. We can show up, we can do the work, we can guide them, especially as coaches. This is like the classic. It's so hard to have those clients where there's nothing you could do to make it right.
Well, you can guide people, but you can't do the work for them. I mean, I've always said that, I can give you the tools, but I ain't going to do it for you. I can't love you and replace you loving you. I can't, and I won't actually. I used to say that all the time. I can't, and I won't actually do that, because then it would take away your own empowerment experience. And that's not real empowerment.
Yeah, I think this comes back to that paradox of the family though, because that's where it often begins and ends, is whatever patterns we brought through from our parents, from my grandpa died at 93, never got sober, but we found a prayer for sobriety in his wallet.
Oh,
Died
wow.
with that. Knew there was another way. Knew that whenever he drank, he was really mean to people. Knew that I mean, I wondered if there was domestics. Who knows, right? But here's the thing. The healing begins with taking a look at your family of origin, what you
It,
are, what you are not, what you're going to unsubscribe to, and say, thank you very much. I'm going for recovery. You
yeah,
know,
it's
I'm, yeah.
a radical healing journey. Radical healing journey, radical honesty, radical self-love, not for the faint-hearted, healing trauma. Uh, One of my friends from Hawaii called me up and she's like, "Did you see this sober challenge?" So we were talking about this before, how it's actually very like, it's a lot of people, and one of my friends said, "You should do this. Like, this should be your next thing, Vanessa." I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I want to talk about, I don't know if I'm ready to open this box here just yet." And talk to people honestly about my own addictions, and let's wait a second. But she had gotten sober as well and was part of the church. And um yeah, it really is. You can take it, I think, inside and outside of, the church, whatever your higher power is, like what you were saying. um and really, what a beautiful, beautiful journey to take, to
Mhm.
become safe within yourself so that you can be that light or guide others, and then, have enough compassion whether they choose to or not, not your business.
I have had a lot of people say to me, "I feel so safe with you."
Mhm.
And it's interesting because I don't think when I was using that that was the sensation people had around me. And some of it is, with growth. I'm 43 now, I'm not a 20 something, right? But I think when we become safe, we're able to help others feel safe, right? And
Yeah, being that reflection for others.
it's okay to not be okay. I think people need to hear that too, so loud and clear.
Yeah, it's okay to take the time to heal. It really is. And I think, we've been through so much conditioning with like the patriarchy, and this hustle, even hustle culture of like, and this boss and just barrel through and push through. And this is what success looks like. I'm like, folks, me sitting outside with my big trees at noon on a Monday, success, man. I'm going to redefine what success is. It's not what other people expect of me, you know, um, or even the pressures and expectations I put on myself, because I've
Mhm.
looked at that. I also like this other little saying, just because you can doesn't mean you should, you need to, or you have to.
Yeah,
I
totally.
took a real deep, hard look at that because I can do anything. Listen, I really can, but do I want to? And do I
Mhm.
need to? And where is that? Is this something that source, God, creator, is this, has this come, or is this just, needing approval, or because I want to feel safe outside of myself, or because I want to control outside of me? That's not it.
Mm, mhm.
It's not it. Um, what a so we've all really been conditioned, we've all really been conditioned by a whole lot of things, and most of the time that's what's driving our lives until we, I think, take a good hard look, or a good soft look, and
Mhm.
get to redefine and redecide if we want to subscribe or unsubscribe from these behaviors, family dynamics, drama, emotions. um, And I think a lot of people think that their social life will be over. This was something that you mentioned. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. You find out who your friends are. That's the truth. Just like your family. You really find out who wants to hang out with you with or without a beer, and you're cool with or without them drinking. And a lot of your friends may have been drinking buddies. A lot of your relatives may have been drinking buddies, you know? But to come back and say, okay, with relatives in many ways, it's the hardest because you're not doing that anymore. You know? And they maybe still are, but showing up and making space for them at the table. You were talking about, like, your mom coming and drinking maybe. Boundaries, right? So, I think one of the things I learned is letting people know as I was coming into a space what I was about, where I was at, and what I was gonna do. And having lots of different people, going back to that coaching thing, to say, "How do I do my first wedding sober with all my old drinking buddies? How do I do that?" And really hard school of hard knocks suggestions. Don't stay in the same condo with them.
Mm.
You need to be able to leave. Bring your own car, right? My dog Shadow, who you didn't get to meet because she passed in May, she was a puppy at the time. She was a part of my, last drinking and early sobriety, and she was my co-pilot. So having a dog meant that I couldn't stay out 3, 4, 5, 6 hours without going and checking in with her, taking care of her, and thereby taking care of myself. And you find your people. Like, you're gonna find amazing people who are like, guess what? I don't want to go meet at the bar and have a drink. I'd love to go to yoga with you and like truly connect and be present. Let's go hiking, right? Like, let's do things where we're not tripping together. We're literally taking a trip, a sober journey together on this incredible adventure called life, right? Because that's the paradox. I mean, how many days did I not get up and go skiing because I was too hungover, right? Or I got hurt, or I hurt someone else because I was not in the best state of mind. So
Yeah.
you find your people. Yeah.
You do find your people and you find different things, and the presence and the inner freedom, I think, for me have been like, I was reflecting over this during even the holidays. I was like, I don't care if it's the holidays. I don't give a shit what people tell me. Who cares? You tell
Mhm.
me this, you can do this, you should do that. No, no, no. I put up a
Mhm.
Christmas tree, I half decorated it. That's it. That's all you get. Like, that's all I wanted to do. I was like, no, I'm not going to pressure myself. Even in the New Year's, this is how you should celebrate. I'm like, no, I felt
Mm.
so
Mhm. Mhm. I think
grateful to not be ripped around by external, society's expectations, family expectations. I'll do what I want to do, what I feel is right. This to me is like, what, wow, liberation of just like, that's success to me.
Mhm.
Check that box.
Mhm. Mhm. I think what's coming to me as you're talking is you find your truth, to thine own self be true, right?
Yeah.
What's really true for you and your people, right? Because
To
then you
know
resonate at the same frequency.
to know thyself and love thyself. And I'm so grateful that we have reconnected over the last year here, this past summer, around nature and horses and sobriety and this amazing adventure paradox called life, and all of your wisdom. Kat, anything else you want to share with people before the last piece of wisdom?
Mm. Last one that's coming through, which I think is really important. And if, people who are watching this as a video, there's a buffalo in the background, right? It's making me think of animals and the importance for me in my personal journey of connecting with animals and nature for healing. My horse Jet, he saw me my last drunks, just like Shadow. I talked about her, lost her, this spring. But when you start connecting with animals, guess what? Animals aren't getting drunk. That is not a thing that the animal kingdom does. They don't
Mhm.
do that. They're totally in tune with authentic self, with being real, with being true, and partnering with an animal, whether it's a wild animal, you're connecting with those, or there's a kitten walking in the room, he might make a showing here, or a domestic animal. I have a little quiz, and it's finding your domestic spirit animal because that was a huge part of my healing. And I think for everybody, because it's every day. If you have a pet or you just have a symbol of the buffalo out there, it's with you every day. Call that energy in for your own healing.
I love that. I love animals and nature. It's so symbolic, so true. So much nourishment that comes also from that connection. It's very spiritual.
Totally. So good.
Where can people find out more about your work?
CatCaldwellMyers.com, my website. You can also find it through theadventureparadox.com. We'll take you there. You can check out my book, The Adventure Paradox: How to Haul It All, Go Big, and Go Home in Your Relationships, which is a crazy adventure story about something I did essentially in postpartum depression, right? To heal through that experience and find myself again as a young mother with horses around the country back to nature. So, yeah.
Mm, so rad. Kat, I adore you. Thank you again for being here, sharing your wisdom, having this radically honest conversation. I love all my conversations with Kat, all of them. Somebody that can really just be myself around and not hold anything back. And what a gift. So thank you today for being here and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in, whether you're tuning in on the podcast or on YouTube. Do go to catcaldwellmyers.com. Check out theadventureparadox.com to find out more about Kat's work. And my name is Vanessa Simpkins. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys real soon.
Ah, love you so much. Thank you.
Love you. Part two. Here we go. What was that you just said?
A lot of people say that at whatever age you started drinking, when you get sober, your life starts over again at that age. Your emotional sobriety is that of a 13, 14, 15-year-old, right?
So true. And I thought about this as like, oh, you healed trauma, then you go back into your life. And it's like you go through your whole life again. You go through your whole entire life again. And that was true. And I can also see it through this lens as well of like, wow, now I'm 44 years old, experiencing this part of my 13-year-old, 15-year-old, 17, 21, 24, part of me. It really is like a recalibration, because there's nothing good in alcohol. There's no actual nutritional thing that's good for you in alcohol. Nothing. It's terrible for a woman's body, especially after 40. And my personal belief about it is that it actually invites in spirits. They call it spirits, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll share, this story about demons here on another maybe podcast. But wow, I firmly believe that. So this, I don't think there's anything good about alcohol, and it does arrest your emotional development. So that makes sense. I'm happy
Totally
that you
does.
shared.
Well, and I think the other thing we were just touching on, it always happens after you turn the mic off, right? Like, let's turn the mic back on, right? But think about again when most people start drinking. Some people do start drinking really, really young, but most of us were about teenagers. But when do you really start drinking? When you finally leave the house and you're in your 20s and you're with this tribe of other 20-year-olds and you're all drinking and trying to find yourselves while drinking, through drinking, with drinking as a part of that. And talk about trauma. Many women, myself included, I had a lot of dramas and traumas as a result of drinking while under the influence. I heard one woman say it this way, and this really summed it up for me. I talk about this in my book, actually. Bad things happened to me, and I did bad things that nice girls don't do because, and while, and within and under the influence of drugs and alcohol. And so then we come back to healing all this trauma. But when did a lot of that trauma happen? Again, it happened in those early years, often in and around and under the influence of drugs and alcohol. Bad things happen in that space. Can happen.
Yeah. And I love that you shared this. And it reminds me of this idea of feeling wild. Okay. And kind of how important it is it's okay to let that wild out, but you can find healthy ways to do that. You can ride horses, you can ski, adventure, you can meet the unknown. For me, it's a lot of it is through art. I'm like, whoa, that color, oh, like that. Like, this is a healthy way to be wild. That's not going to get me in trouble, that I'm not going to loathe myself after, or because wildness is a part, our shadows hold a lot of energy and light, and we are all of it. Okay. But there are healthy ways and less healthy ways to express that kind of wild woman or the wild parts of us. And you're right. I think a lot of people learn this or experiment or start drinking in their teens, and that just becomes a way of life. Everybody does it. I mean, it's so accessible. And you're looked at like crazy. What do you mean you don't drink? Ah! It's like, whoa, hey, ho, he. Wow. It's something to really watch, just how your life changes when you stop drinking, and kind of the challenges around that, and the stigmatism that people have.
I think there's a buzzword again in our industry right now, but imposter syndrome. And you have this experience of imposter syndrome, suddenly hanging out with all your old friends who, let's say, are all getting high and you're not, and you feel like an outsider, right? It's this really sort of strange feeling. And that's why, going back to what we talked about earlier, you find out who your friends are, but more importantly, you find out who you are with or without that stuff.
Yeah. And I love that you shared that. It brings up for me just how not belonging I felt in my own family. That for me was really the trigger. Let me drink, let me do something to not feel that. Yeah, let me just do anything to not feel not belonging.
Amen. Well, and also we use alcohol, again, think about in your 20s, you finally left your family, you're trying to belong, right? And so you drink up together to be part of, to engage. Like, I remember I went to college in Boulder. There's a mead distillery, so wine made out of honey, right? And I was like, "Oh, it's good. It's made out of honey. It's good for us, right?" We can co-sign so much bullshit to make things okay for ourselves and not look at the facts of what am I doing with these folks every night, right? Like how is it playing out? The drama that comes again, it's like where there's smoke, right? That can come around it. And especially when you're in those really transformative years of trying to find your tribe, your family, your God, recognizing this may be my bloodline, but they're also going to give me many gifts and maybe some curses that I'm going to have an opportunity to either see, do my own work to see, take what you like and leave the rest. It's
Mm.
theirs, right? I mean, the greatest paradox of family is that although we come from them, we don't have to be them. And we don't have to run away or escape in a way where we're giving them the finger either. That might not be necessary or kind. It could be saying, I love you. You're like that. And I'm not that. I'm this. And that's okay. I'm going to love you on this side of the fence. It's cool. You do you, baby. Like what if we could come back with healing, with the love of both sides of the paradox, right? I feel like that's the ultimate adventure that people they forget to show up for. Like you're never going to get over who your mom and dad were. Even if you cut them off, even if they were totally toxic, they're always going to be a part of you. So yeah, loving from a distance, totally. But like, can you hold the love in your heart? Because guess what? You would not effing be here if those two people hadn't birthed you. However it came about, man. Right? Like I talked about this in my email this week. Thank your teachers, starting with your parents. And you know what? Not all the gifts were good, but you know what? My mom needed to hear that so badly. She sent that email to 100 of her friends. Great. Look, my daughter's thanking me. you know, like think about how we're showing up. And this isn't the Pollyanna side of let me just show the light. Thank you, mom and dad. Ha ha ha. I'll go talk about you with my therapist, right? Like that's not it, right? It's like owning both the light and the dark that both are true. I can love you and be talking about you with my therapist, working through how I feel about your mental illness and wishing you could get better and understanding that you're not going to, and just loving that when I call you about something really exciting and you're like, meh, it's not about me. It's about you.
I love that you share this idea of, addressing the trauma, not being, Pollyanna about it, but also accepting the gifts.
No more lies, especially to yourself. Stop that.
Yeah, the truth. And that's what they say, and the truth will set you free.
Every time. Every time. All right. I love you. I have children walking in the door now. so
I
that might be our natural cutoff.